Hello and welcome to another episode of the Endless Celts Podcast. Today is Friday and I'm joined by James and Anthony. Anthony, it's been a long time. What have you been up to this summer?
Not much, mate. Got a new phone, which was pretty good, and it means my Wi-Fi is actually working at the moment. Fingers crossed that remains the same. But yeah, just back my holidays, mate. We got back yesterday, so not doing too bad so far with the jet lag. But no, we had a great time. I very deliberately kind of silenced all my WhatsApp chats just to try and kind of sit back and relax and chill. But I've been keeping a bit of a close eye on things, just kind of seeing what all the updates and that are on Facebook, etc. And needless to say, we were over in Florida, so I've seen quite a few Mickey Mouse parades, but nothing as make-believe and as nonsensical as some of the stuff that was coming out of Celtic's Twitter page, has to be said.
Excellent. Aye. Well, you've picked up your holiday very well. The timing of it couldn't have been better. You've certainly kind of distanced yourself from the madding crowd, shall we say. James, good to see yourself as well. I like the top. Is it an underrated top, would you say? Do you think people will look back more fondly on it in time?
Probably. I think the only thing that people remember about it is that game up at Love Street, up at Paisley, or whatever it's called now, St Mirren Park. But I always quite liked it. I know it got a bit of a hard time when it first came out, but I didn't mind it.
Excellent. Well, I think I'll probably get the hardest time out of everyone here because I'm wearing a Real Madrid top.
No qualms for me. It's a lovely top, that, to be fair. But yeah, I think possibly when I was growing up, I kind of loved all the the romanticism of Barcelona, but there was always a wee bit of me that always, when you're growing up, that Real Madrid still had, they were well in the Galactical phase at that point, and you couldn't help but still look on at them a bit admiringly. And I think, unfortunately, Barcelona have long since been able to, give up they've long gave up the right of being, the world's kind of the club with morals or anything like that. I think they are just another club these days. So yeah, if I would probably find myself kind of wanting Real to win a Clásico these days, to be honest. But yeah, it's a smashing top, Gav.
Thank you very much, mate. Thank you. Right, well, to the viewers, thank you very much for joining us and get your comments coming in. More than welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button. Anthony, when you were away, we managed to get over the 2,000 marks for subscribers. So big landmark, and obviously you were a massive part of that, of building a podcast. So congratulations to yourself and to everybody all around. So who have we got in the building? We've got Joe Hamilton, an absolute masterclass from Brendan at the press conference. Lowell has to go. We will certainly talk about that. We've got Sanfran in the building. We've got Thomas Burns. We've got Stephen Murdoch. And we will welcome more people as they come. So I guess some of the topics for tonight's agenda will be the Celtic and Kilmarnock game. We'll be playing in them at Rugby Park on Sunday. But before we get to that, probably more recently is the press conference that took place today. Callum McGregor was interviewed by the press, and so was Brendan Rodgers. Funnily enough, it took Celtic media about 3 or 4 hours in order to upload it. I wonder if they were going through it with a fine-tooth comb to decide if they should or should not censor certain points. But it looks like everything made it to the fore. So we've got the press conference. We've also got the fan protest, and that's going to be kind of manifesting itself in a delayed entry for the fans at Rugby Park. And we'll be talking about the European campaign ahead and the league campaign, what our expectations are. Before we really get into that, Anthony, as I said, you've timed your holiday very, very well. And in our group chat, it's been just like bitching and sniping and, maybe a bit of that, but I think maybe some people are saying it's a straw that broke the camel's back in terms of maybe the direction that Celtic Football Club have been heading in, manufactured by the board. So it was a really disappointing transfer window, which led to the final day of the season where we were looking at free agents and things like that, people who we had wanted that fell through for circumstances. And we've had plenty of excuses given. So I'm not asking you to do an autopsy about it, but what was your general takeaway from it? And are you part of it? Do you feel the same disappointment as the majority of the Celtic fans?
Well, I think in terms of the way the whole window went and how it's and how it's closed and all this sort of subsequent stuff that's happened for that, then yeah, I would have to say, let's just say certain areas that we were hoping to get addressed appear not to have been. And again, we have seemed to have been through the point of, I get, even as one of these guys that would be classed more as a fan, I'm well aware that Adam Idah was not Kyogo, but it appeared again that there wasn't a concrete plan. I think Brendan, just before that was one of the last things I seen before I went, that Adam Idah wouldn't be sold unless guys were coming in, and I'd heard potentially about this guy, and I don't know if he's ended up going to Ajax or not, but he seemed to be. It looked like he was potentially getting lined up. So you thought, well, you can understand that was a decision that's made sense. In terms of the boys that have came in, we seem to have signed another winger along with Balak Wisha, who's, I think it would be unfair to sort of just judge him basically on 60 minutes at Ibrox alone. I think he's going to have to obviously get a bit of time to settle in. And I suppose there is an irony, Ian Atchell could end up scoring 30 goals this year and being a real hit. But I think in terms of the optics of things, and again, I almost feel it's like everything that's happened post the window with some of the things that's come out of the Celtic media department have left a really sour taste. And a lot of people say it was failure to qualify for the Champions League, etc. That's really broke the camel's back. I think that the straw had kind of left even before the tie started. Of course, there was it was really disappointing to not qualify for it, but there was that. I seem to sense as well there was a lot of shoulder shrugging going, well, we've not prepared for it anyway. So, if you can't beat, regardless of whether you've got players in or how quickly or how long it's getting to get deals done or whatever, you look at that Celtic squad on paper that played 2 legs against a team for Kazakhstan, and I get that, there's no easy games in Europe, etc., but to play 180 minutes plus football and not score a goal, and to be honest, out with Dyson Sitter, which he really has to put away, that didn't even really look like scoring. You can just, it was a performance to me that kind of summed up the feeling around the club at the minute. And but from the leaking of the sort of stuff about Brendan to the Sun newspaper of all papers, to that AI tone deaf nonsense that came out on Saturday night when people were coming back for the Legends game, to the we were joking there about stuff back about the stuff on the website, etc., to the fact that we now don't have any additional booking fees for the Europa League if anybody wants to buy the tickets online. It's just things like that. It's just it's the messages that are coming out of the club at the minute. For me, it looks like that it's just completely and utterly out of ideas. And I'm quite glad today. I know we'll go into the press conference in a bit, but I'm glad that Brendan didn't. And there is quite a lot of the times where he will sort of stay on the fence and not go too far one way or the other. And he didn't set the place on fire. He didn't do a Conte or anything like that today, but he was very, very clear on what he thought about the transfer window itself, and obviously the actions of the individual who thought that the Sun newspaper was a reputable place to mouth off to. At the moment, as I say, you're right, Gav. Obviously, we've been away for the 2 weeks and trying to take a step back for it all. But when you from a distance, and certainly in the things that we've seen in the last 2 weeks, it just seems to be a club that is completely disjointed at the top. There is a real sort of bad feeling around the club at the moment, and a lot of the supporters will say that a lot of that is of our own making. The the board's own making. And you know, I've not read too much about the minutes and all things that with the things that have been organised with the fans. I think the plan will have to become more clearer for that movement to sort of get the end goal that it wants. But it's clear that that there's that all is not well at Celtic at the minute. I think that pretty much goes without saying.
Absolutely. Brendan Rodgers had used the phrase before, manufacturing your own stress. That pretty much sums it up, shooting yourself in the foot. James, I guess we'll get right to it. The press conference today, starting with Brendan Rodgers. He has, well, we get to the juicy part about the rat in the building. So he was asked in response to that exclusive. I think it was Roger Hannah and the Sun who had it, and he was asked in response to the quotes about engineering his own exit and tearing the club apart. And he said it was a cowardly action by whoever it was. He struggled to understand why, given his close relationship with some people in the club, but at the same time, he wasn't surprised by it. He said, I was briefed upon the first time I was here when I left, and now since I've came back. So it sounds like he's talking about where he does have strong working relationships with key individuals, but at the same time, he's aware of a rotten core within the club, in the board, and he didn't name anyone, but he said that he's not surprised, and I think that we can read a lot into that. And the follow-up question was, that sounds like you know where it came from. And I had to rewind it when I heard him say it, but he said there was a long pause, a hint of a smile, and then he said no. And then he winks. He winks at the people in the press conference. Is Lawwell the rat?
Well, I don't think you need to be kind of Harvard educated to come to that conclusion that that's maybe what was implied, because, as you say, he did name check a few that he had close relationships with, and there was one name that was conspicuous in its absence that didn't get a mention at any point across the press conference or the wee interview that he done with Sky. I don't know if it was before or after, but Peter Lawwell didn't get mentioned at all. When he was speaking, he said he had a good relationship with Desmond. He speaks to him, I think he said he speaks to him daily. He said this similar way Michael Nicholson, Chris Mackay get a mention as well. But when he was talking about Nicholson and Mackay, it was more on a kind of personal level, that they're good guys and all the rest of it, and that they work Christmas Day, whatever that counts for. They work Christmas Day. You could argue that actually makes you bad at your job and you're having to catch up and having to work Christmas Day. I don't think it quite is meaning he's 100% all in and committed. But no, watching the press conference, as I say, I think it is fairly obvious that Peter Lawwell's the one that he's speaking about. And the impression that I got from when he was talking about Nicholson and Mackay is that they're perhaps out their depth, but they should be kept around in some capacity, but just know the roles that they're in. But no, I think it definitely is all. I mean, when he was speaking about the first time around as well, as you say, when he was getting briefed against as well, and then I think it's actually the first time he's explicitly said on the record that the recruitment side of it was part of him leaving the first time round. I know everybody, we know that, and it's just obviously assumed, but I think that's the first time he's actually went on the record and said it. And then you think back to who was the chief exec when he was here the first time round, and obviously it was Peter Lawwell, and there's all the rumours about them not having the greatest relationship, if any relationship at all. And I think it is fairly apparent that that's the guy. But what I also think, to take it away from the press conference, just speaking in general terms about it, I think it's disgusting that there hasn't been anything communicated to the support about it, in terms of maybe having a wee internal investigation to find out who it was, saying that the guy fucking be signing off the email will probably be the one that's sent the email to Roger Hannah to brief against him. But I think that I mean, somebody should lose their job with that, surely. I mean, I know he said that the day, but I don't think that's a mad thing to say, is it? I mean, you've got one of the most successful managers in the club's history basically saying what we all think, and then we're going to run into the, as Tony says, the sun of all places. We're running into the sun to try and throw dirt on him. And I struggle to understand the logic. Let's just say it was Peter Lawwell that's ran to the sun, whoever it was, regardless. What's the logic there? Are they thinking that putting that out's going to get the support on side? Are we meant to be that gullible and button up the back? We haven't been watching. So I think somebody absolutely should lose their job about it. I think there should be internal investigations or whatever to find out who it was. I don't think it'd be a hard thing to do, if we're being totally honest, but there has to be an appetite to want to do it. And as we know, if it is who we think it is, then that appetite isn't going to be there to get him out the door, certainly for those in the boardroom.
Absolutely. Anthony, it's one thing a player leaking dressing room secrets to the media, but it's an entirely different thing whenever you've got a senior member of staff speaking to the media like that. It's such a dirty tactic. I wouldn't even call it a Machiavellian tactic, because that would imply that you're doing something to benefit yourself, to step on top of someone, to progress your own kind of trajectory within the club. But I don't know how this benefits the club, because all it's going to do is kind of strengthen the bond between the manager and the fans. So I just don't know what the benefit of it was. It's just like throwing shit at your own club. Everybody comes out looking worse than that. I guess, what's your take from it? And is it much more toxic than we actually suspect it can be in the club?
I think so. They're definitely, certainly within individuals. I think, and listen, companies and, establishments can still thrive even if there's, tension between certain key figures within that, whatever it is, whether it be the NHS or, a big company or something like, the boss and the chairman and the chief exec might not get on, the chief exec and the head of recruitment might not get on, etc. But you'd like to think, the governments especially, most cabinet members they're all fighting within themselves to get, bigger budgets and etc. But there should always be one kind of overarching goal, and that should always be, the well-being of the club. And and I know he will not mind me saying this, and obviously as James is saying, it looks very closely like that it is Lawwell that's doing it. And the blogger James P, he's been on the show before and has said that, I think it was the morning after, it was either the first leg of the Athens game or the second leg of the Athens game when all this kind of happened in the summer of Brendan's third season, which he then subsequently left in the February. And James happened to be in Celtic at that, but in the club at that point, and he actually had a conversation with Peter Lawwell, and he's basically says he knew at that point that they weren't speaking then, and he made a few quite derogatory statements and was not interested in who heard it about Brendan Rodgers. So if it is Lawwell, it wouldn't surprise me at all. But that being said, it just seems to be at the moment that there's nothing kind of positive coming out at all. It just seems to be, Brendan's getting asked the same questions again and again, and you can see he's frustrated at having to answer them. Questions that perhaps aren't his to answer. I think he's been very transparent throughout the summer, that he wanted deals done quicker. He wanted and I think that's why, throughout the summer process, that's why I'm maybe not seen as one of the ones, that flies off the handle every time I'm on, because I am of the opinion sometimes that deals can take longer than necessarily would like. I'd love nothing more than us to have 8 new first team recruits in by start of pre-season, but it doesn't always happen. But what seems to be happening now is it's not necessarily that players aren't wanting to come. For what you can gather from Brendan's point of view, and he's probably who he's the one who I would side with in the argument, it's that players have been getting identified, and that the recruitment team themselves, who we're not privy to that, but it seems to be that they're identifying recruits for windows, upcoming windows, and then it always seems to be the block at when the deals are getting done, when money's getting mentioned, that's where things seem to come to a halt. And he's got sort of fronted that up week after week throughout the window. They then went off and had the 2-week break, and the only communique that's came out for the club is an AI generated fluff nonsense that you could have. I've seen similar statements for them, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, no matter what it was, and it seems to be, and you can only go off the record of what's been said by the club. The official sort of view of those in charge seem to be, it's no our fault. It's players, agents, and UEFA. They're the reason why we're not signing players. And James used the term, did they think we're buttoned up the back? Even as somebody who's militantly, I don't kind of turn red every time I see them. But by the same point, it's like these are talking pish now. The statement last Saturday when I seen it, I genuinely thought when I first seen it, if somebody had kind of wrote it as a piss take, and then I actually scrolled, you scroll down, you scroll back up, and I'm going, that's actually off the club's own official channel. And I remember there being a few years ago when we were sitting with 50 or 60 million in the bank, and they were saying, we recognise that's no the way forward, and targets it. So it's the same stuff over and over again that seems to be happening. And you can only blame UEFA, etc., for so long. And I think one of the other things as well is, but it doesn't stack up to even the most basic of scrutiny. I read a lot, or I listen a lot to when David Lowe, the boy who was kind of one of Fergus's advisors, comes on, different Celtic media and whatever. When guys like him speak, it's worth listening to, and he's quite, in quite layman's terms, laid out or stated that Celtic could have spent significantly more in all the years gone by and still not nearly, breached FFP or anything like that. And also, he's laid out in quite, simplistic terms of how you can modernise the club without putting it in financial danger. The message about, whether it be renovating or expanding the South Stand, or any hotel developments and all that, it always just seems to be, it's not viable because we're in the SPL, or that's this, that, or the other. There always seems to be a reason why things can't happen with these guys. If I was saying that to my brother during the week, if these guys had been in charge in the 90s, there wouldn't be a 60,000 seater stadium outwards. So you've got to actually, they always seem to see a reason why things can't happen, rather than let's do it. And as I say, I don't think they're all encompassing evil. I just think they're safe guys by their sort of expertise, their accountants and things like that. And I just think they are a group of guys that are out of ideas and don't know how to communicate in this sort of kind of modern, the modern way of social media, etc. And I think they would, if there was going to be, I wouldn't be against them being removed or changed, but we'll talk about that later. What there has to be, I think, is a real plan. The protests, etc., didn't really properly kick off in the 90s until we had, we wanted the board sacked, but we also wanted the club to survive. And when, then out with that came Fergus. I don't see anything like that at the moment, and of course times have changed. But so how that would happen, it's up to greater minds than me. But in terms of just the messaging and the undermining of the manager, it's just it just seems to come across as a group of guys running a football club of huge size and significance that just seem to be completely out of ideas.
Aye. And one of the kind of impressive things throughout this whole saga over the summer and now into the early games of this season is the way that Brendan Rodgers has conducted himself. And he spoke about it in the press conference about having the weight of the club on his shoulders. And I don't think he's making himself out to be a victim in that regard. He's just probably speaking quite frankly. And the fact is that a lot of questions are being directed towards him. Well, he's almost been put in a position where he has to account for other people's incompetence, lack of ambition. A lot of the areas of attention are really not his doing. Certainly, he will take some criticism for the failure to get past Kairat Almaty. But the bigger issues here are really not his doing. He can only do so much. He can only work with the tools that he's got at his disposal. But yet, the fact is that he's been able to kind of, I think a lesser manager than Brendan Rodgers would have kind of flailed and wilted, sorry, and the kind of heat of some of these questions that have been dragging on for quite a number of weeks. James, one of the other kind of segments of that interview was someone had asked about Brendan Rodgers' future. Now, we would think that, well, maybe before today, we would have thought, well, that's it's drawing to a natural conclusion. The contract will end at the end of this third season, and Brendan Rodgers will leave because the board are unable to match the ambition of him. He spoke about progressing, about improving, not staying the same, not maintaining. And it's certainly, if you look at the forecast of where we're going by our actions, then we're certainly not improving. We're not even maintaining. We're I think most of us would agree we have regressed. But he was asked a question about staying here for longer, and he said that I would love to stay for longer as long as everything is aligned and we can operate how we want to. He said that no contract offer has been given to him, but he would love to stay. Probably doesn't change anything. That I think we all quite knew that. You could probably argue he was only ever going to come in here for 3 years, or you could possibly say, well, he might have stayed longer than 3 years if we continue to show ambition. So it probably doesn't really change our perception of the fixed mindset that we had. But I guess sometimes you cling to hope. I spoke to Anthony the last time I think I was on a podcast with him about managers having a shelf life in Glasgow, and sometimes a 3-year window is the best time afterwards to change it. But Anthony did make a really good point that Brendan Rodgers has probably been, outside Jock Stein, one of the most successful managers we've ever had. He spoke about whenever he came in 2016, how he upped the standards, where now every season we go in wanting a treble. And he spoke about the changing of an attitude. Certainly we're not exhibiting world-class standards in every sector of how we function as a club, but from a playing style, from that professional point of view, he certainly has raised standards. So I guess we always kind of cling to hope, and as Anthony said, he's a high caliber manager. So is there any kind of reconciliation that you can see between Brendan Rodgers and, or a realignment between Brendan Rodgers and the board, or do you think that they're never going to change their ways, and that does spell the end of Brendan in Glasgow for the final time?
Well, at this point, I would be amazed if nothing changes and the board remains as is. I just think it's quite simple that Brendan Rodgers won't sign a new contract to stay here. I think we're past the point of saying we'll change, basically. I think we're past that point. There needs to be actual change. We're kind of past the point of words in that regard. So I think there would need to be movement at boardroom level. And as I said, he says in the press conference, he seems to go on with the majority of the people on the board. So whether it's a restructuring and no a restructuring that we done the last time where it's just musical chairs on the table, get guys in where they're good at, get football people in for the boardroom, whether that means we bring in we're bringing Darnell D back up for Swansea to be Celtic fucking CEO or something, but we need to go and actually get football people in the room, in the boardroom to just to be there and oversee things. I know we kind of touched on the director of football model the last time as well, and the kind of opportunities for that, but in order for Brendan Rodgers to stay, there absolutely needs to be change at the boardroom level. And at this point, if I'm being totally honest, even with the letter and the protest and everything, I would be surprised if it happens so soon, basically within this season, for that contract to be signed. But look, as I said, just kind of tagging on to what Tony was saying there about not being able to get the players in and stuff, in my opinion, and I've never been a fan of the board, but I've never been like McGinty levels against the board. This is like Christmas for McGinty, where everybody been so united against the board. But that for me, this is a cycle. This is what happens. It's just been amplified this year by the fact that not only could we no sign the players that we had to sign, but we've also got players that have went that haven't been replaced, and we've also still got players in the squad that don't want to be here. That was another thing that came out of his press conference today, was that Maida's wanted away since February. So Maida's wanted away since February. Kuhn, we've pretty much known about since that time as well. Pretty much after the Bayern Munich game, we knew that Kuhn would be away this summer, and we didn't replace any of them. Then obviously you've got the Kyogo saga. You could argue the Ida thing after. Obviously, I know we brought Ian Acho in, but Ida wasn't meant to be out the door until somebody else came in. So for me, this is a cycle. It's just been amplified by everything that's happened, and then you've got the Yang saga as well. All these things add into it, which make it that bit worse this summer. But as we were saying last week, in regards Celtic, when it comes to the qualifiers, we never go into them prepared. We said last week where it was Beaton at centre half, O'Connell at centre half, McGregor at fullback, the fullback four against Mitchell, and when Ange came in, we never go into these qualifiers prepared. That isn't anything new. And as I say, the only thing that further kind of made it worse this summer was the reasons that I've mentioned in terms of the transfers, and also the fact that it was Kairat Almaty. If it was maybe a kind of like Salzburg or something like that, maybe it would have taken a wee bit more heat off, but it was just the fact that it was pretty much, well, it was the easiest draw on paper that we could have got. And obviously we couldn't navigate it, and that's why the manager and even the club captain coming out and telling us what we needed prior to it. We didn't do it, and we get papped out. So sorry, that's just going off for a wee tangent there. But no, in terms of Rodgers' future, I will be amazed if Rodgers here next year. I just don't see it happening at this point.
Another segment that I really want to focus on for tonight's podcast is the playing squad, making do with what we've got, because we can't get away from that. The three of us are season ticket holders, so we were going to the games, and obviously you want to be entertained. So I really want to speak about the squad that we've got, the expectations for the league and for Europe. But before we do that, I just want to kind of continue on with the theme of the kind of the disenchantment with the fans, probably a massive understatement. But just kind of leading on from that, we've obviously got the fan protest that's going to be happening on Sunday at Rugby Park. So Celtic fans, of course, being the 12th man, the protest will be that they won't appear in the ground until the 12th minute. Anthony, I want to kind of get your thoughts on this. So what do you want in terms of a protest?
Well, this is one of the things that I'm sort of kind of I'll need to read more of what was sort of agreed at the minutes with that. I think there was a big sort of thing. It was at Gracie's Bar in Glasgow. Lots of different representative, a lot of different groups. I think, as James is saying, there's been a lot of, with it being a lot of, a cycle and whatnot. But I think even in the preceding years, there was a lot of the board they would always face the fury at the gates, on the back of a bad result in Europe or whatever. But they knew that when the time came, everybody would still vote to re-elect, and we all know the AGM's just kind of pantomime anyway. But we know it's all pre-prepared. We know that the votes are already sewn up, etc. And I know that even that's not really going to change this year. But there's no doubt that for so many of established supporters clubs, the trust itself, to almost unanimously vote for no confidence in the board, that is a significant, and whether or not you're pro the board or not, that can't be denied. That is a significant change in terms of the outpouring of the fans. What I worry about doing the protest, the protesting part so early, is that it might lose its effect quite quickly. Now, as I say, I'm saying this as someone who's not read if maybe there is a plan and I've just not read about it. But and again, I accept that the circumstances are different compared to around the removal of the Whites and the Kellys in the 90s. But Celts for Change and others, the boycotts and the protests didn't really properly start until there was enough of a mass movement publicly to get things rolling. Now, yes, there's been lots and lots of media, and we've all signed our name to this thing. But I think going forward there would have to be some sort of like a kind of Mark McGlone type figure backed up by other guys that then really kind of snowballed it. And when they did all that back in the 90s, Mark McGlone says that they had thought about right at the start, boycott the games or, protests outside, but they thought that it's going to get lost in the wind. It might just come across as a bit of saber rattling. And they had to really build their case before it then became to the point where the boycotts and the protests were successful. I worry that calling for the non-attending of the first 12 minutes of a game right from the start, that it might lose its effectiveness sort of straight away. And I totally accept that there'll be other fans that will say, well, this is only the stepping stone, and if it is, I'll hold my hands up and say, right, well, fair enough, but we need to know what the end goal is. I feel that protests and rebellions, if that's the way you want to describe it, they only really work. They only really come to fruition successfully if there's a clear plan and a clear end game and a clear plan to get to that end game. I think at the moment fans are absolutely with validation very frustrated at the way things are off the park at the moment, and they want change. The problem is, what does that change look like? In 1992, 93, up until the takeover, that very much came in the form of a Canadian businessman who laid out his plan in concrete form. He was going to refinance the club, rebuild the stadium, and put the club on an even financial footing to go into the new millennium. At the moment, from the outside looking in, it seems to be just a lot of frustrated fans that are asking valid questions, but they're bringing up all the problems, but I'm not necessarily seeing solutions. So that's that, and that would actually, and I'm saying that as someone who is, I'm not anti it. But I just look at you look on a bigger scale, and I accept that it's a different kind of ownership, but you see all these Man United fans over the years that were always phoning in to TalkSport saying that the Glazers are going to be in last chance saloon. The Glazers couldn't give two fucks about Man United fans. They know that the money's still coming in, and ultimately they can say that they ended up getting a bit of it was basically rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic at Old Trafford, and I worry that almost pressing the red button too soon it might mean that it will lose its effectiveness. We'll probably have to wait and see how the Europa League attendances look. Mm-hmm. We'll probably have to wait and see how it plans out on the park as well. I know a few of the boys have joked that says, what if we score 2 goals in the first 10 minutes of the game and then we go in and we're 2-0 up, the protest lose its effectiveness. So that's my big worry. I'm not against fans voicing their opinion, and when you look at some of the questions that have been asked, they're very, very valid. We don't know what necessarily the plan is that it's going to look like going forward. I'll be as happy as the next guy to see these guys moved on, but I don't want to just see them moved on for change's sake and handed over to some American vulture capitalists, or God, even worse, some sports washing project for Qatar or Saudi Arabia. You would want it to be coming with serious people with the best interests of the clubs at heart. And until we can get that, and then a clear, succession plan put in place, I just worry that it might not be as effective as what the fans hope it will be.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really, really good points. And I guess one of the kind of key differences between the 90s and now is with the Kellys and the Whites, they never had a pot to piss in, whereas the board right now. And
Got an Olympic-sized swimming pool to piss in.
exactly. So if we were to try to hit them from a financial point of view, which is a point that James has made, then they might end up using that rainy day fund, which has been created, so it's kind of difficult to flush them out that way. So James, kind of eager to get your comments as well. But even if we, as fans, don't have the power to impact change, it's still important on us to vent our feelings, and that might come in the form of visual demonstrations. I was thinking, whenever the North Cuff do their tifos and things like that, at Parkhead, they need to run that by the club officials to get, pardon the pun, the green light, don't they? So they can do it at away grounds, but at Parkhead, they're not going to be able to show what they want in terms of the banners, the tifos. That's going to be censored, won't it? So I'm just trying to think of what sort of demonstrations can they do. Obviously, we can, as we said, that the delayed entry into the stadium. But if we don't have the financial muscle to move them out, we don't have the shares, what can we do to make it as uncomfortable, as unpleasant as we can?
So that's the thing for me. The way the club is set up, it's the change that I think most people are looking for in terms of Dermot Desmond being ousted. That's going to be nigh on impossible unless somebody manages to come up with tens of millions of pounds that they find down the back of their couch or something. I don't even think Ross's couch is that big, so we might go into plums for that. But unless that happens, then what I'd be looking for is just a total restructuring, which also is a million miles away. But like we've all kind of touched on there, our chief exec currently, the guy that's dealing with our transfers, is a solicitor. We don't have a director of football. We don't have anybody in the boardroom with experience in, as I said last week, nobody with experience in sport, let alone football. The last time we ventured out, we brought a guy in for rugby whose face didn't fit. He lasted, 3 months, and then he was out the door, and would you Adam and Eve it, Peter Lawwell's back in the scene. But for me, that's the change that I want. I don't think Dermot Desmond will go anywhere. He said as much, and he's obviously said that he'll be passing his shares on to his boy as well. And I think the thing that makes that aspect of it more difficult is Dermot Desmond, he doesn't go to the, never mind though he doesn't go to the games, he can't be bothered to turn up to the AGM once a year. He can't put a day aside to fly out to Parkhead and show his face and basically state what the plan is for the club.
Can I ask, on that point, do you think that this kind of current saga, this crisis, if you will hasten the succession plan from father to son?
Mate, I wouldn't be surprised if Dermot Desmond is none the wiser to anything that's happening, to be totally honest with you. Like Tony says, like the Glazers didn't give a fuck about what Man United supporters think. Dermot Desmond's a businessman. Celtic as a business is flying. I think that could be the end of it. And look, I don't think they've ever, don't get me wrong, they've never been so universally hated as they are the now.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's been kind of like movements against them in the past, and like Tony was saying, it does just kind of die a death. This time, you'd like to imagine it will. Excuse me, sorry. It will be a wee bit more sustained. But the fact that the guy that you're trying to oust doesn't go to the games, doesn't go to the press conferences, and he doesn't stay in Glasgow, it's going to be hard to make any difference. I mean, look, there's been an open letter put out with questions on it. That was met with that ChatGPT statement on Saturday night, which was a lot of nonsense. Just didn't answer anything, didn't explain anything. It was just somebody talking at you for what felt like an hour. There's been umpteen votes of no confidence for supporters groups, podcasts, whatever. There's obviously all listed on that letter as well. Radio silence for that. Then there was the outcome for the fan survey. We're still waiting on the fan survey that was actually put out by the club last year. We've not had that, but the supporters have managed to get together and get a survey completed within a week, and we've got the results of that. Still absolutely nothing. And then obviously the meeting itself that happened, and look, I think the meeting itself, having kind of read the minutes, is obviously in its infancy. It's in the early stages. I don't ever think there was ever going to be anything kind of long-term planned that night. I think it was more just a an introduction essentially as to what the plans could be moving forward. But the 12-minute protest thing on Sunday, I would be all for it. And look, there's no pressure on anybody to stay out for the 12 minutes. If you don't agree with it, then obviously go in. Exact same with the Europa package. I know that's no like an official thing as such. It's just kind of down to the individual. But again, there's no pressure on it. If you want to go. If you don't. Exact same for the 12-minute thing. But look, I would be for it, and I think it's just made a symbolism thing. And as we touched on last week, the thing that Melly said for the 20-minute Tims with the black and green scarves, I'd like to see that take off, because as much as it's a wee thing, and it, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really count for anything, it is a visual representation, like you've seen at Old Trafford with the green and gold scarves. It lets them know, because they clearly aren't they going to take any notice otherwise. I mean, we had all this stuff coming out the last couple of days about Michael Nicholson having it on a whiteboard that he basically had to do fan engagement. And you're like, why is that there? Is that not just a given that you need to talk to what you see as your customers? The guys that's basically gave you that £100 million rainy day fund that you like to speak about, would it not be nice to keep them in the loop just once in a while? So I would support the protest. I've not got a ticket for Rugby Park. If I was there, I would partake in it. But I don't think that MD's under any kind of pressure to do so. And I know there's the aspect of people saying you want to support the team, and of course you do want to support the team, but the board, and as I say, the lack of communication, that lack of communication didn't start in the summer. That's gone back as far as you like. We've never really had anything. When Don Mackay came in, there was a wee bit. I made the sit down with Ange and stuff like that. That was kind of.
Here's your friend, too.
That was good at the time. But obviously that kind of died a death pretty quickly as well when Nicholson, when Don Mackay left. So, I support the protest. Where it goes for here, I don't know. Something that I was trying to think here. Like, I know obviously there could be boycotts of games themselves and things like that. But as I said last week, I think that just justifies the rainy day fund. So I don't think they'd take any notice of that. The only other thing would be boycotting the merch, the new strips and everything like that.
That's an easy decision, because it's far too expensive anyway. Like,
and it's coming out every 2 minutes, but then it's Adidas that's kind of going to start asking the questions, do you know what I mean, as opposed to, because I think Celtic are now classed as an elite club with Adidas. So if the sales plummet, then Adidas will start asking the questions, and maybe for there you could get something. But it's just the way the club's set up, the change in terms of ousting Dermot Desmond is going to be nigh on impossible, in my opinion.
I think what needs to happen as well is this group, as I say, I would like to think they would appoint somebody in that kind of Matt McGlone sort of sense. And I'm not trying to talk about kind of because I'm sure there will be a few kind of egotistical boys within that group that, you know, fancy themselves as this generation's Matt McGlone. The thing is with guys like Matt McGlone is they didn't seek the limelight. It came to them, and we would need someone to kind of do the rounds and go on your platforms like your TalkSport and Sky, etc., and lay it out quite clearly why it is that the supporters are feeling the way they do. Because I can guarantee you, on Sunday you're going to have that rent-a-gob Chris Boyd coming away with all sorts of nonsense in the Sky Sports studio, saying that we're this, that, and the other, and all this success, and they're still. I can write you the script now. The nonsense he's going to come away with, especially if Celtic were to, but on both ways, whether we win the game comfortably, be like that, and they're still greeting, and or if Kilmarnock were to, get a result, the fans not being on the stands will be the reason why we've not won the game. It'll be spun both ways, and then that then ventures onto other platforms like your TalkSports, etc. Because you've even seen it already on Facebook, some of the kind of football channels going, 20 trophies in 9 years, and they're still greeting and all this kind of thing. There has to be quite stable-minded, level-minded person that's got a good communication sort of background to explain why these protests are taking place and the reason why the fans are feeling the way they are. It's not to say that it will necessarily get any more airtime or that it won't be ignored or anything like that, but we can't allow, for wanting a better word, enemies of Celtic to kind of be able to sort of write the agenda themselves, because I said it's going to come from day one on Sunday, when that clown's in the studio and he'll be spouting all levels of nonsense anti-Celtic, which he does all the time. So hopefully, even for a starting point, hopefully we'll have Chris Sutton in the studio as well to be able to, put him in his place. But as I say, it's got to be, I'm all for, peaceful protests, etc., and fans voicing their views, but it's got to be done in a coherent and strategic manner.
Sorry, just to piggyback on the back of what you're saying there, I think that's where social media probably goes against like that kind of idea of that thing happening in the current day. Because even just today, when I was reading about that protest and stuff, there's people saying, I've no damn what the Green Brigade tell me today. Well, it's no the Green Brigade that's telling you today. The Green Brigade are a part of it, but so are tens of thousands of other Celtic supporters. It's no the Green Brigade's protest. The Green Brigade put it out on their page, so did countless other Celtic pages. And I think that's where I know I seen people saying about Paul John Dykes with Axom as well, and like, no, I don't like him. I wouldn't do what he told me. He doesn't go and all the rest of it. I'm like, but that isn't the point. I'm like, if you want a figurehead, he's never going to be universally liked, and I totally agree. The idea of having a figurehead that can be kind of clear in their communication would be great, because as it stands now, we're just getting statements out on Twitter, and look, this kind of group is 2 weeks old at this point, so I get it's totally in its infancy. But I think if look, I don't know MD for the Green Brigade, so I'm not even going to pretend I do. But if it was like the head guy for the Green Brigade that came out and fronted it, the Green Brigade's done loads of stuff that I've disagreed with. I think we've all disagreed with on here. They've done some stuff that I think's really good as well. But you'll get that people that are the hardcore against whoever it is. And it's like nobody's asking you to fucking put Green Brigade stickers up in your bedroom wall. It's just one message coming from a united kind of group of supporters. It's just this person that's fronting it. And I just think that's where kind of social media is a killer for that kind of movement.
And I suppose as well, and that's fair, James, and it's worth noting as well, even when the boycotts were at their most successful in the 90s, there was still 15,000, 20,000 guys going in to watch the game. So I'm sure in the non-social media world, the Celts for Change guys, won the universal like as well. So it's a fair point.
Mm-hmm. And I guess one of the key differences between then and now with social media is that the message can be reached to a far wider audience so quickly, whereas back then they were standing in the piss and rain in Kerrydale Street, handing out flyers for a long time before they got any traction at all. So perhaps with the right type of figurehead, who's coherent, articulate, and doesn't have a shady background, maybe someone like that can galvanise the fans, but that's easier said than done. And at the moment,
I nominate Stephen.
Oh, that'd be good. That would be good. Right, so I guess we can move on to the actual game itself. Moving on to the footballing aspect of the club. So, guys, wanted to speak to you about the expectations for the league campaign. Now, normally, whenever we bring in new signings, I'm on YouTube and I'm like going through it with like a fine-tooth comb here, looking for their strengths or weaknesses, and then probably take it a wee bit too far. But I think I've been steeped in negativity the past few weeks. So I don't want to look into any kind of perceived flaws of the new guys. Balikwisha, Anthony, as you said earlier on, let's not judge him on 60 minutes at Ibrox. I've listened to a few different Celtic fan podcasts where they've had the experts talking about Balikwisha and what he can bring to the club. I've heard one expert say that he likes to beat men, and I've heard another expert say that he's the type of winger who likes to pass and move, and then like kind of cut inside and take shots, but he's not going to beat someone with pace. So I've heard conflicting reports on the guy, and I don't want to read into it too much right now because I need some positivity. The thing is, we've got Balak Wisha. This is a guy that we've identified. We've been after him for over a year now. Now he's in the building. He's a very good age. And apparently he's got a really good mentality as well. And we've also got the guy Tunetke, who we got from Hammarby. He'd only been with Hammarby since earlier on this year. But for one reason or another, we ended up pulling the trigger and we've brought him into the building. So we've got two wingers. We've got James Forrest, poor James Forrest on the right, who he's wondering, who am I competing against right now? And we've got all these guys who are perceived to be left wingers. Not to mention Maida, not to mention Jota, who's out injured, who might come back early after the new year. And we've got Kelechi as well. Brendan Rodgers spoke really highly about Kelechi. He said that he will be in contention for the weekend, and he said that this guy is always fit. He's not the type of guy who's always injured. He's got a good attitude as well, and he was only interested in bringing in someone who does have quality. And let's not forget, Kelechi and Iheanacho is only 28 years old right now. I think the strength that we've got as a squad is our defence domestically is still very good, very good. And midfield, yeah, like everybody's a year older, so you may be hoping for a little bit more from Engels, who's now got a point to prove. You brought in Nygren, who has got a different type of thing to offer than what the other midfielders do. But I guess the kind of bad thing, if we're going to be totally honest with ourselves, is that Callum McGregor's 1 year older, and he came back from the disappointment of the cup final against Aberdeen, and he said that had make him more determined than ever. But you could say that his performances so far this season have left a lot to be desired, and he's also went through another defeat on the back of a penalty shootout as well. So I'm optimistic on the whole. I'm optimistic back middle to back, but up front a bit of an unknown quantity. At the same time, and I'll pass it over to you guys, we've got Rangers who've outspent us this season, and we've got a new threat in Hearts. We don't know quite how they'll go, but they're still joint top with us with 10 points in the league. So it's interesting times, and although that you could say that we're depleted, we've not strengthened, we've regressed. From a neutral's point of view, it makes it a little bit more exciting. So it's a different dynamic. Any of you like to kind of talk about your thoughts on the league campaign this season, and how narrow it might be, what you think can be achieved? Either of you?
Yeah, well, I think you're right in the sense that I think that's one of the things that's probably been the biggest frustration of this the summer so far is, Rangers have had a lot of upheaval, and obviously I think it's safe to say that all is not rosy there at the moment either, although I did see that they spent quite a significant sum on deadline day for it. So it'll be interesting. You mentioned Hearts as well there, Gav. It'll be interesting to see how they two cancel each other out. I think they play tomorrow on Sky, so dare say we'll get more of an idea of what a Russell Martin Rangers looks like tomorrow, now that the window's closed. But all is not rosy in that garden either, and we can see, can Hearts keep this positive start they've had up. In terms of Celtic, you're absolutely right, and I think the back four, obviously, I think there was some pictures today, Tony Ralston having a moon boot on, which isn't great. But from that comes opportunity, and that maybe the young lad Donovan might get the nod on Sunday. And I do still think, you're right on domestically, we still have Carter Vickers. We've got some cover for KT now as well, who's as much as I was Greg Taylor's an admirer, there's no denying that even a 60-minute Kieran Tierney's an upgrade on Greg Taylor. That goes without saying. I think there will have to be a wee bit more, a bit more rotation in the middle of the park. You're right, as I say, I think Callum, he's probably been, because we've not got off to a flyer, and obviously we've had the huge disappointment in Europe, there's the sort of microscopes on him a wee bit more. I don't think it would do any harm to take him out of certain games and rotate him with either a Nigrin or an Engels or a Bernardo. As I say, we do have players in that mould who are a year older, and there's no reason why they can't come into the team a bit more often. I think you've been even prior to the window closing. I think what a lot of the frustration has been with that front end. We do have the wingers in now, and I really do hope that they go off to a good start, because I think if they were to start off pretty indifferent, that negativity could grow around them, probably through no real fault of their own. But I think we were looking for someone to really be, the striker up front. That was the kind of main goal. And coupled with the fact that we've sold Adamida, and coupled with obviously the frustrations with Diogo in the January window, I think a lot of supporters were expecting not even just Iheanacho, but another striker to come in as well. I've not even really seen anything negative about Shin. Yeah, I think he's looked okay when he's come on, but you don't know, is he going to be? He could end up, once he gets a few goals, could he really kick on, or is he going to fall into that kind of Timu Puki bracket of he doesn't do it necessarily much wrong, but he just doesn't really do much right either. And you kind of, hopefully we kind of have to hold our hat on Iheanacho now, because there's not really anyone else at the back. I know Johnny Kenny's been scoring some goals, but I still would have reservations about him being any kind of first choice at Celtic at the moment. And I think that's why a lot of fans were hoping / expecting there to be a bit of money spent on the striking part, especially with the fact that they just got 7 million for Ida as well. So yeah, I think it's that front line that makes almost the squad look a little bit more threadbare than what it actually is in terms of quality. And I would still be absolutely expecting us to be the favourites for the championship. We've got a 6-point lead over our nearest rivals at the minute. But I think whether it be the Champions League or the Europa League, I think where some of the deficiencies of the squad will be shown is on the European front. And that's a worry, because I think there seems to be, even if we'd went out and spent, a lot more, if we if we ended up getting Real Madrid, PSG, Arsenal, if we could have got a really bad Champions League draw, you could almost have said, look, well, we're always going to be fighting against these guys. We're always going to be the underdog against those kind of teams. But, we've heard so much recently about, our rivals, being amazing big stalwarts on the European front in the Europa League. But it's quite a tricky draw we've been given, and you can see the narrative building that if we start kind of getting picked off in games, that, you can see that narrative building that, oh, look, they can't even do it in the Europa League either, and the negativity around the club will grow, and the anxiety in the stands as well. So I'm really hopeful we can get off to a decent start in Europe and build some momentum. I think, unfortunately, where we're at the moment, we are a Europa League squad. But I still think there are some good players in there. But certainly domestically, I think we've got more than enough to go over the line. But it's probably what a lot of fans have been frustrated about. That's not what a lot of fans would say, that what the situation is at the minute, that's not where we want to be kind of measured on. That's certainly Brendan's frustrations. But yeah, I would like to hope that we can get off to a good start on Sunday and really kick on between now and the next international break.
Aye. That's a fair assessment, Anthony. James, kind of touching on the domestic campaign and expanding to the Europa League. For me, particularly the Europa League, it's the type of competition that we would have fancied our chances last season. If you look at the teams that you could potentially be up against. Well, obviously, we know who we've drawn against, but the kind of the big hitters in the Europa League, think about it with the squad that we had last season, okay? Like, you've got Aston Villa, okay, they outclassed us maybe in Birmingham last season, but you've got Aston Villa, Basel, Bologna, Dynamo Zagreb, Fenerbahce, Feyenoord, who are, yeah, probably a decent outfit, Lyon, Nottingham Forest against Ange, Porto, the Huns, Roma. But I think that when you looked at our peak last season in Europe, you would actually be quietly fancying our chances as a Celtic fan. But obviously, it's not like that anymore. For me, we're now in the Europe's lesser campaign, and with an understrength squad, I think it's actually a bit of an unwanted distraction. Like, if I had the possibility, I would just put it to the side. I'd forget about it. But you can't do that, and we have to participate in these games with whatever enthusiasm we as fans have, as the players have, as Brendan Rodgers has, when really it's all that matters right now is the bread and butter of winning the league again, and somehow try to be able to get back into that momentum which we've lost this summer. So, expectations for this campaign?
Well, I'm got to be a bit of a doom and gloom merchant, I think, after after Tony's take there. But no, I would be putting all my focus into the league this year. I'm at that stage already. I think that you're banking on all the left wingers that we've signed playing brilliant on right wing and arguably up front. In Maida's case, I know obviously he's no signed, but you take my point. And then there's the flip side of that as well. We are Yang, Maida, the guys that wanted away and have been held here. And then you've got McGregor. I know McGregor's a captain. He's going to have to pull them all together. But he's asked for quality, which we didn't get. They'll have seen everything that happened with Ida, Tilio, and all the rest of them. And it makes me wonder about guys like, well, Maida, obviously a prime example, but even guys maybe like Hatate that have probably got an idea that they'll be away, if no January, in the summer, because I think he's one that could have left this summer. Carter Vickers maybe falls into that bracket. So I think they'll be sitting maybe kind of thinking, well, if you've done that to him, is that what I've got coming to me as well? So if I'm being totally honest, I don't imagine the dressing room will be a great place to be at the moment. Obviously, that's up to the manager and the captain to try and remedy that. But as I say, I still think the forward line is poor. The Balikwisha thing, and I'm no basing it off the game at Ibrox. I said it before, way before he was even signed. Just having seen what I seen him, I think he is what he showed at Ibrox. I never got the impression that he was fast or tricky or anything like that. I thought he was pretty safe, pretty kind of falling into that maybe like Lewis Palma, Haksabanovic, where they'll go
I was
by
going to
him.
bring the Palma there, yeah.
Aye, but they've not got that pace to get away. Look, I am the chairman of the Lewis Palma fan club, you know that. But in terms of fitting in at Celtic, I don't think it's going to kind of fit in the team the way that we hope it is. Tenecti, obviously, I don't know really anything about. I just know his stats aren't great, but it's maybe harsh taking a judge him on that because I know he's only been at Hammerby for kind of half a year. Ian Acho, I really don't know. It's. I just find it really hard to get excited about that signing, to tell you the truth, and it's unfortunate because it isn't the players' fault. But I really, really worry about that forward line and even the midfield. I think defensively we're soundish, but the midfield in the more difficult games, and I think Hearts are going to be a difficult game this year. Hibs are going to be a difficult game. We've obviously seen the game at Ibrox, which would have got fit by stopped. I think we're in for a Rugby Park. Arguably falls into this category as well. Obviously, with that kind of the Astro Park. So I'm at the stage already where I'm at, right, everything, let's go all in the league. Anything else is a bonus. Because I think in order to have a run in the Europa, as I say, you're banking on all your signings being superstars. How MD watched us play the 2 games against Kairat and think adding in another couple of wingers and a free agent striker is going to take us to the Europa League final. is beyond me. So that's where I'm at. I know it's glass half empty, if even. But that's where I'm at already, to tell you the truth.
I think it's a fair reflection. Like for me, as a Celtic fan, I don't class myself as cynical. However, sometimes I do kind of have to. I do have some cynical opinions, and whereas before, from a position of strength, I'd be looking at new recruits and I'd be watching our YouTube videos, as I kind of said earlier on, and I'd be a wee bit critical about if I saw what weaknesses and like, well, like whenever I saw Jota's highlights on YouTube, whenever we were rumoured to be getting him, I'm thinking, yeah, he looks like a player who could really strengthen us. And when I've been looking at Balak-Wisha and Taneke, I've not been enamoured, but I'm in that position right now because we're not in a position of strength. Where I'm hoping, I'm crossing my fingers, I'm banking on these players being able to come in and being able to really help us to take responsibility. And because we can't be consistently asking the same players to go back to the well, like James Forrest, who's getting old. Even Cameron Carter-Vickers, I would say that Cameron Carter-Vickers, despite the fact that he's in his 20s, has already peaked, which is still a very impressive peak. If he could maintain that, brilliant. But like people like Hatate as well, who might be looking around them thinking, where's the quality coming in to push me on, to motivate me? And it goes back to the press conference. Brendan Rodgers actually said that the past few weeks of the window impacted our players. It felt like we were playing in slow motion the last few weeks, and it's his job to galvanise the players. And McGregor actually used the word as well, galvanise. He said that if we win at the weekend, it should galvanise the squad. I don't want to be hearing that. I don't, because what happens if we don't win at the weekend? Well, we wilter. That's a bit of a fear as well.
But I think the worrying thing about them saying that is we have had a good start to the season domestically. If you look at it in the league, 3 wins for the first 3 games, and then you go to Ibrox and take a draw. Now, normally you'd be fine taking a draw at Ibrox. And so in that regard, you're 6 points clear of Rangers. You've took 10 points for a possible 12. The only points you've dropped has been at your biggest rivals travelling there. It has been a good start to the season domestically. So when they're coming out,
points-wise, playing style.
No, absolutely. I'm not naive enough to obviously know think they know what's going on, but I don't know if it maybe feels a wee bit defeatist or what, and that's kind of playing into my thinking when I'm saying about the dressing room and stuff like that as well, where they'll be sitting kind of seeing what's going on, and then you get back to the Europa League squad and like Shin Yamada totally bombed out it, and I'll be surprised after the back of that if we see if we see him more than maybe a handful of times again. To be honest, it just feels. The same with Anamura. Anamura's still a Celtic player. The guy that we openly advertised was going out on loan, and I imagine Tierney isn't going to play at Rugby Park on Sunday on that surface. Anamura won't get a look in, and he really is your backup left back. I know we've got Sirachi in now, but he played the Livingston game, he played the games in pre-season, and he looked all right. So it's just things like that. Well, I can't even blame Rodgers because it's not even players. If Brendan Rodgers, I don't think for a second would have wanted Shin Yamada. I don't think he would have wanted Anamura. I've got question marks about the totally pointless signing of Simpson Pussy for Man City. It's just all these wee kind of things, and then as I've said, like the Yang, just everything coming together. It just doesn't make for a good place to be, in my opinion, just now.
Yeah. Before we got onto the actual the game on Sunday, just to kind of the last point against I just brought up the thing. Rodgers has a chance to use this situation to make the team have an us against everyone, including the board mentality. And I watched, was it Axom today? I think I watched Axom today, and one of the contributors on that, one of the guests, had actually said Gordon Strachan was able to kind of utilise that tap into that feeling of us against them, that siege mentality. Maybe not as extreme as a Jose Mourinho tactic, but that wherever you just focus on your own, keep everything in-house and block out the noise. And I don't know if Brendan Rodgers is able to adopt that tactic, but it certainly probably wouldn't hurt us. But yeah, as we said, we can only make do with the tools we've got right now. And I guess, and I said it, I asked Ross whenever we did the podcast a few weeks back, before the transfer window unfolded as it has done so. And I said, do you think that this will be the biggest challenge that Rodgers has faced domestically as a Celtic manager over his 2 tenures? And at that point, yeah, he said he agreed. And now fast forward, and the chips are down even more so. So I think probably we might be in unison with that one, that it might be one of the kind of toughest challenges that he's got, trying to deliver the league title, despite us being favourites. But we're not firing in all cylinders. Anyway, we're going to move on to the Celtic and Kilmarnock game. But before we do that, we do have one feature. Anthony, James was on last week, and I asked him the questions. And the question is, build the perfect Celt. So I'm going to go through a couple of, like, kind of more than a couple, maybe about 10 attributes. And I want you to kind of build your perfect Celt. And it'll be Celtic players from your lifetime. So James did it last week, and we'll continue this with yourself. So build the perfect Celt. Starting off with right foot.
That's fairly good. That's a good question, to be honest. Right-footed player. It's quite hard
that's the one that I spent the longest on as well.
It's because when you think of some of the most creative players, some of them you wouldn't know which foot was which was the most strongest. To be honest, I'll probably be really, really plain here, and I'm just trying to think of, you know, sometimes where he plays most. But in terms of, you know, like accuracy going forward, and he was only with us for a short time, but I always felt he was one of these guys that when he got on the ball, he was really good. And I know I'm going to get slayed for this, but I love Paddy Roberts on the right. For a right foot, I'm going to go Paddy Roberts, but that's purely off the top of my head.
That's fine. James last week, he went for James Forrest, so that's fine. Left foot.
I would probably say, there's again plenty you could pick from, but I'm going to say Alan Thompson. Free kicks, crosses, corners, and on form, Tomo was a joy to behold, and he was always good for either a goal or a sending off against the Huns. So left foot, Thompson, probably the best. I don't know, formations change and styles change, whatever, but probably my favourite left-sided player in a good while.
By the way, before we go into the next one, I heard it was on, I think it was on Super Scoreboard. It was either that or a Celtic podcast. And the question was, I think it was Super Scoreboard. And he said, which Old Firm player has received the most red cards from, like, I don't know, from like a timeline, maybe like this century or whatever. And it was Alan Thompson who's received the most red cards. Probably not surprising. But at the time, whenever they asked the panelists, they didn't have a Scooby. So the next one, so we've done right foot, left foot. What about football and IQ?
In terms of, I think that's probably a toss between Lubo or Nakamura. The way they could find that kind of mavericky type players that could, you know, just put a ball in a sixpence and, you know, read a game so well. Henrik could read a game brilliantly as well, but I'll go with the gift of God. I'll say Lubo.
Okay, that's 2 in a row because James went for Lubo last week. Speed.
Yeah, probably between Didier Agat or Dyson, but I would say the fact that he's maybe had a bit more of a, I would say Maeda, just for, you know, the sort of a lot more of the success that he's had against, you know, rivals and, you know, in Europe and stuff like that. I would probably say in a race Dyson would win.
Okay. Technical ability.
Well, I said Lubo for the other one, didn't I? So I'll say Nakamura for the technical.
Okay. Passing.
Get some great passers of the ball as well. Maybe a little bit under the radar. To be fair, I'm not going to say Paul McStay because I only seen Paul McStay in like when he was like midway through his last season. So I think that would probably be unfair. That probably would be my pick. But I always just think Paul Lambert was a really good passer of the ball. But it was one of the probably similar to Lennon. It was stuff that kind of maybe went a wee bit under the radar. Lambert was a bit more had a wee bit more kind of grace about him than Lenny did. So I think for passing, I always thought used to rate Paul Lambert.
Mm-hmm. One that I forgot to ask James last week, so I'll get James's thoughts. But starting with yourself, Anthony, dribbling.
Jota.
Mm-hmm. James, who would you go for? Because it wasn't something that I thought of last week.
Lewis Palmer.
Did you get it? Is that Sean Maloney in Strachan's first season? Aidan McGeady, latterly under Strachan as well. You could argue, great entertainers.
McGeady was going to be my proper answer.
Lewis Palmer.
Anthony, shooting.
Henrik. There's been a lot. Gary Hooper, very clinical. But Henrik knew where the net was.
See, whenever I think of like shooting, I think of like sharpshooters, like people like Robbie Fowler, who whenever they hit a shot, they were aiming for like the in between the posts, the side net. That's what I think of. But Henrik definitely up there, brilliant. What about tackling?
Well, the obvious one to go to would be Bobo, purely because a lot of the times the boys, the guy ended up, in Rose Ed. But in terms of, doing the kind of the unsung hero part of the job, you could argue, Lennon was brilliant in the middle of the park, but always just in terms of the back three, especially under that O'Neill era, my favourite of the three was always Big Johan Mialbi. I thought he also read a game really well, and snuffed out so many dangerous attacks for the opponent. So purely because he still looks like an absolute god, I would say Big Johan.
By the way, see, talking about like Roy Aitken, who plunges opted for, I think our generation, we've really missed out not being able to see Roy Aitken because obviously held in high esteem from Celtic fans. And somebody's went for Marvin Colbert. Heading.
Oh, well, it's quite hard because you either think, is it kind of clearing the danger at the back or putting the ball in the net up front?
Liam Scales.
That's what's his name? Funny enough, Henrik was brilliant at heading the ball. But I would say probably Hartson probably used to score a great amount of goals with his head. Pierre as well, right enough. But I'll say I'll go Big Bad John.
Big Bad John. He deserves a mention tonight. What about aggression?
I would say Neil Lennon, and I mean that in the best possible way, but in the sense that he's underrated at how good a football player he is. Everyone just thinks he was this kind of, snarling, bleach blonde or shaven-headed maniac in the middle of the park. Same way that they say with the likes of like Roy Keane at Man United. Now, I'm not trying to compare Neil Lennon to Roy Keane, but that like people just think Keane was a shaven-headed nut job. Roy Keane's one of the best football players, one of the best midfielders of his or any other generation. But Lenny channeled that aggression in the right way. He felt like he was one of us on the park, and just like you want him in the team on Derby Day and things like that. But yeah, channeled it the right way. You could say Scott Brown was very good at that as well, but Lenny, just for nostalgia's sake.
Brilliant player. We've got 4 more to go. Team player.
It's a really good one, actually. I'm going to say Chris Sutton, because not only did he play up front, he also had many a stint at the back as well, and just did the job wherever he was. Probably few more versatile players in that kind of golden era, Martin O'Neill, than Sutton. I'm sure there's a few others that just, go wherever they're, you could near Beaton would happily fill in at centre half. He probably was happier to do it probably than what we were a lot of the time. But yeah, I'd probably say Chris Sutton.
That's a good one about Sutton, because he came up here, having been like a Premiership winner with Blackburn Rovers, and if Henrik had to forge a partnership with like Mark Viduka, who was Sutton's predecessor at Celtic, it wouldn't have flourished the same way. But the fact that Sutton was able to recognise that Henrik had qualities that he would never have, and he was able to kind of, dovetail with him and do what he needed to do to get the best out of Henrik. So good shout for that one. Set pieces.
It's got to be Naka, isn't it? I mean, a free kick 25 yards and closer was sometimes as good as a penalty. Under Naka, Lubo was special. He could hit a few as well, but Naka's, and especially in the 07, everyone will always remember the goal he scored at Rugby Park to win the league, or obviously the two against Man United. One of my favourite Nakamura goals is the 3 in a row season. I think it was one of the last games at the old Love Street. 89th minute again, Rangers had played on the Saturday and they were a few points ahead, and basically any more drop points and we really were out the race. And Naka, it was about maybe, couldn't have been any more than 25 yards, but it was quite central, and he kind of curved it and then got it back down and went in the bottom of the net, and that just kind of kept us within touching distance of Rangers, and with the derby still to come. Absolutely brilliant goal. Nobody better than Naka for me.
Aye, the guy was an artist. Okay, last two. By the way, James went for Naka as well for set pieces. Second last one, Power.
I think you got to go with Bobo for that one. Nobody was knocking him out the road. He often gets classed as like a big bomb scare. That sometimes when people forget, especially in the UEFA Cup, that run during Seville, it was almost the bigger the occasion, the better he played. No bad for a pass as well sometimes, Big Bobo. But in terms of pure strength, nobody's getting by him.
And a few good mentions for the set pieces for Patrick, James Simpson, John Collins.
JC.
Brilliant. And even Van Hooijdonk was brilliant. He had that kind of knack of like long distance free kicks, and it would still bounce before it went in, but the keeper wouldn't be able to get to it. Really talented player, Pierre Van Hooijdonk. And last but not least, leadership.
There's some great ones you could think of. I'm trying to think purely for probably Martin onwards. You could easily say Paul Lambert. You could easily say Neil Lennon. Good. You could easily say that is a really good one. I'd probably say, and you like to pick managers for that, because you could say, for in terms of leadership, I think given just how poorly things were post-COVID season, it needed somebody that brought a bit of hope and a bit, you could see where we wanted to go. And if although it didn't get everything right the first 7 or 8 games, we dropped quite a lot of points away from home. We lost the first derby, and it looked like Rangers were potentially going to win the league again. There was still that sense of calm because you could see the parts and place where we were trying to go. So in terms of leadership, I'd probably say Big Ange as a manager. But leadership on the pitch, I think probably because he's done it with subsequent managers over a prolonged period of time, and a lot of fans always, a lot of the players that he's worked with always say that he was a role model, would probably be Scott Brown.
Good call. James, another ask you about leadership. Who would you go for?
I think you did. Did Daniel say Scott Brown as well? I'm sure.
You didn't go for. No, you went for Scott Brown for aggression, but leadership was
Scott
same
Brown.
one again. Aye. Cool. Okay, excellent. Anthony, thanks very much for that. Some good selections there. And thank you for everybody from the comments, thinking of like names that we hadn't really considered. Okay, so guys, we're at the 90th minute of the podcast, so we're going to finish up with the Kilmarnock and Celtic game on Sunday. Now, as somebody actually said in the comments, not many questions were fielded to Brendan Rodgers about the actual footballing aspect of the fact we've got a fucking game this weekend. But that's £1 in the spare jar. But in terms of what we know of little missions, we've got Kieran Tierney, who's just came back into training, but he's been out for 8-9 days. So Brendan Rodgers was non-committal. That's literally all he said. So Kieran Tierney might be there, might not be there, but we do have the guy, I don't know, Sriracha, what's his name? Something like that. Tony Ralston, as we said, in a moon, I was going to say in a moon unit, in a moon boot. So Ralston's out. Kelechi, we've been told, will be available, whether he starts on the bench, whether he's in the lineup, who knows. And I guess the final thing, in terms of Kilmarnock, they are much like a similar team in the league. They've had 4 games and 4 draws. They've also scored the same amount of goals as what we have domestically, which is 6. But they've also conceded 6, whereas we've got a clean sheet in the league. So, James, let's start with yourself. Expectations for the game, line-up. Will it be a hard-fought game? Scoreline, the full shebang. Go.
I think it will be a right hard game. In terms of team lineup, I'll go Schmeichel in goals, Sriracha, Scales. Does he go Carter Vickers? I think he will go Carter Vickers just because he maybe kind of but because of those injuries at both kind of fullbacks, I think you need kind of it'd be a bit harsh to throw Dane Murray into that back line. So I'll go Carter Vickers, Scales, I'll go Colby Donovan at right back. Moving into the midfield. The midfield I think is going to be interesting because I know that Engels gets a hard time at it, and I would have probably given Ul man of the match at Ibrox for whatever that counts for. It was a poor game. So I think he'll stay in. I think McGregor will stay in as well, purely because he's a captain. So I'll go McGregor, Engels. That last spot, I don't think Hatate deserves it. So I think it will be Nygren, but McCowan's there as well. I feel as if McCowan always just gets kind of flung to the side, and people talk about Bernardo, and it's almost as if we forget McCowan is there.
He's getting 3 goals already this season.
Who? Luke McCowan?
Nygren.
I think it will be Nygren. So I'll go Engels, McGregor, Nygren. And then the forward line, although we've signed all the left wingers, I think it will be Maida on the left wing. I think Iheanacho will get flung straight in the middle, and on the right wing, I'll say Barry Quisha because he was. Well, saying that I was going to say he's a big money signing. He's no, because Tenective then cost a couple of $100,000 more. So I'll go Barry Quisha purely because he played at Ibrox. But honestly, the forward line could be names out of hat at this point.
Okay. So we've got a bit of not uncertainty, but probably vulnerability in terms of 2 new fullbacks. Colby Donovan making the second appearance, possibly the right back. He will be targeted if he plays. We know that. And the South American, a left back. And then in your midfield, dropping Hatate, playing Engels with McGregor and Nygren, and up front, Maida on the left wing because that's where he's best. Or trusting Kelechi, and right mid, not playing Forrest, but you're going to give Barry
Quisha. Aye. Well, one of the new signings are going to need to play in the right wing. They're all left wingers. People keep telling me they're right wingers. They can play anywhere. They're left wingers. That's where they play. So one of them are going to need to go out and play in the right.
Can I just ask, you wouldn't play Yang on the right?
I wouldn't play Yang in the B team personally, Gav.
Well, it looks like we've got a few conundrums here, a wee dilemma. Anthony, who would you go for?
I actually the team that James picked, I actually think that will be the team as well. Although I would probably have went McCowan. Like if it was up to me, I would go McCowan for a game like this. In the middle, I just think he's got a wee bit more tenacity about him than Negrin. But then again, fair enough. Negrin started relatively okay domestically. You could find that where McCowney start, they might put Negrin out wide like they did at the start of the season. But the team that James had picked, I do actually think that will be the team that starts. Rugby Park's a funny one because for long periods in the 90s, it was always one of your kind of bogey grounds, and it's always a park that Brendan himself had quite a few dodgy results in both terms with him at the helm. But I don't know what it is. The whole feeling around the club, I think, could very easily go one way in terms of negative. But I think Brendan, the way he addressed certain things in the media today, and the way that Callum mentioned it as well, I think, as I said, the door's closed now. The window's closed now. So this is us until January, whether we like it or not. And I think that small bit of kind of the calm and that brings, I think, can kind of focus a few minds. And I think that one of the bits that I loved today was when Brendan, he said something about whatever, I can't remember the exact words, but basically it was his duty now to basically get the best out of the group of players that he's got. And that was almost something similar that happened at the end of January in his first season, where we then, okay, the performances weren't great for the first few weeks after that, but we got the results. And I think at the moment, provided that I think we might have to strap ourselves in potentially for a few not so great performances. But if we can get some wins, maintain the good start domestically that we've had to the season, then hopefully things can start to look a bit brighter. It'll remain to be seen what the protest brings in terms of energy with the team. But I think there's more than enough on that park that can go get the result. And then, as I say, from there, it's another thing to build on. There's going to be a lot of big games now between now and the next international break, even though it's not too far away. But yeah, really important. Regardless of what happens at Mordor tomorrow, I think Sunday's a real opportunity for us to send out a message of our own, that they can have as many data analysts at Tynecastle and as many venture capitalists at Ibrox spending money here, there and everywhere. But for 13 of the last 14 years, the title's been with us, and it's just Sunday's a good chance to remind people why that is.
Very well summed up. And just to, before I go to James, what's your score prediction?
I'm going to say 3-0 to Celtic.
3-0. Fucking love that, man. Love that optimism. I'm glad you're back, Anthony. Really am. We needed that optimism. It's a breath of fresh air. James, what's your score prediction?
Well, I'm not as optimistic as Tony, so I'll go 2-0.
Equally as happy with that, mate.
I can live with that.
Just before we go, Gav, sorry, I know you said we've not got a quiz, and just a wee quick question. I got asked this in work, and there was one that stumped me. 3 players have played for Celtic and also have caps for Cameroon. Who are they?
Jean-Pierre Doumbé.
That's the one that I couldn't get. I thought it was French. So there you go. The other 2 are the easier ones.
There you go. And Guillermo would see Cameroon.
Yep, and then there's one more.
Cameroon. Oh.
Fairly recent. Played under Brendan Rodgers.
Oh, Ibu Kouassi?
No. Would have been in the same time, I'm sure.
Oh, Malumbu?
No.
Moloko?
Who?
Moloko.
Can you make up players, Gav? It doesn't count if you make them up.
the centre midfielder that we bought.
The centre half of Wolves. Moyokolo. It's not
Aye.
him anyway. He
Couldn't
played
back
more games.
venue?
No, played more games than a lot of the ones I've mentioned. Played a few games, scored a few goals. Scored against Rangers at Hampden.
There's no
Yeah.
Kansas.
Scored against Rangers at Hampden, so that would have been Rodgers' first seat.
I think he scored against Rangers at Parkhead as well.
And Cham?
Yep, that's the one.
Oh,
Was he
yeah.
Cham? I thought he was French or not. There you go.
I switched allegiances. That was a kind of trick question, but I knew that he had switched. It was Doumbé was the one I couldn't get because I thought he was French. Jean-Jules Pierre Doumbé. I don't know how I ever thought he was French.
He's always a good pub quiz question for the Scottish Cup final winners as well.
Aye.
That's a good one.
Again, if the only game that I can think of off the top of my head that was worse than that draw at Ibrox was that cup final against Dunfermline. That was chronic. That was a cup, I suppose.
That was the Jimmy Johnson Cup final, wasn't
No, that was the year before. We played Dunfermline in the League Cup final. I'm pretty sure Dion Dublin scored that day.
Aye, you're right enough.
But we played Dunfermline in quite a few because Henrik's final game was in 2004 was against Dunfermline as well at Hampden. We must have played Dunfermline quite a few times in cup finals at that point.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it. And to everybody in the comments, thank you so much for your participation. So we're possibly doing a podcast on the Sunday morning. Is that right, boys? Have you?
I think Ross had mentioned about potentially doing it. I think it was the Sunday of the Partick Thistle Scottish Cup game. But don't quote me 100% on that, mate. As I say, I've not been reading up on everything that's been happening, but I think they'd sort of maybe, potentially penciled that one in for the cup game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right about the time. It's not this Sunday, potentially further down the line. But the theme is like, if you remember the Sky Sports programme, the Sunday supplement, where the journalists would come out with their toast and their croissants and their fresh orange and stuff like that. The brunch podcast. I think that's what we might be going for occasionally. So stay tuned and we'll keep you updated about that. But thanks again, everybody. Enjoy their weekend and hail. See you later.